Welcome back to Fusion 360 Tutorials. In this video, we are going to learn how to create an animated assembly using our previously created caster wheel assembly. So the first thing we want to do is we want to open up our previous assembly, and we can verify that that is the one we created by looking at our animation that shows our exploded view. And then we're just going to make a copy of this. So we're going to save this in another folder. First of all, we want to create another folder. So we're going to go up to New Folder in the Data panel, and we're going to call this folder Animation. So just click anywhere outside of that, and we'll see our new folder called Animation exists. And the next thing we want to do is we want to save a copy of our previously created caster wheel in that folder. So we're going to go up, select File, Save As, and we're going to select our location here. So we want to go to our newly created folder, selected Animation, and we're going to change the name of that to Caster Wheel Assembly. So we have created that, and we are working on that file now. If we go into Animation, we will see that Caster Wheel Assembly in there, and it does not exist in our previous folder. So we're going to click on that folder, and what we have created in here, if we expand our simulation or animation, we're still going to see our storyboard here. We're not going to use that for this demonstration. We're going to add a new storyboard by clicking on the plus sign down here, or we could add a new storyboard up there. So we're going to create a new storyboard, and a dialog box will pop up, and we're going to select Clean. So we have an option of starting from the previous, or we could select Clean. We're going to start with Clean and select OK, and we will see the new storyboard pop up here at the bottom. We want to right click and delete this second storyboard. So select that storyboard, right click, select delete, and that storyboard is gone. We only have one, and what we want to do is we want to rename this one. So right click on that again, select rename, and we're going to change that to Caster Wheel Assembly as well. Before we begin creating our assembly or our animation, a few things that we want to look at in some of the menus are the transform command, where we can transform components, restore home, auto explode, that would be one level, auto explode all levels, so we may have sub-assemblies within assemblies inside these components. In this case we don't, we have all single part components. And we have manual explode, show height, and appearance, where we can use the same dialog box to change appearance on parts within our assembly. We also have this show height, where we can hide our components, and if we expand our browser, we can see all our components in there. We don't see the names just because this isn't stretched out enough, but they are all there. Annotations, we're not going to worry about that. And view, this is important. So when we are rotating views, zooming in, doing different, using different viewpoints, Fusion 360 is going to record those and add those to the animation unless you have this on pause. So right now it is on pause. We can select Control R or select this button to unpause it, and every zoom or rotation, whatever we do, is going to be added to the animation. So right now we probably don't want to do that. If you do want to leave that on record, down in our timeline, there is this section here referred to as a scratch bar. So our timeline is currently at 1 second. If we drag our cursor into that timeline, whatever we do when that cursor is in there, or timeline bar, whatever we do is not going to be included in the animation. It might be a personal preference to always go back to there. I like to keep just the view paused and go back, and we can add those views, any changes or rotations to the animations at a later point. So view, let's try and keep it on pause for now for this tutorial. unless you want to get used to sliding that back into the scratch bar. And our publish, which is going to allow us to create our video, export it to a video file, or save it in the with the rest of our files on the Fusion 360 cloud. A couple other options at the bottom of the screen. We have our timeline zoom, so we can zoom in our timeline so we can see a different magnification. If you want to get to really fine details, typically I'll keep that in the center. And down here we have our rewind, play, our fast forward that goes to the end. We have our full screen mode and a few settings which we'll just leave on the default for this tutorial. When we are doing animation, the transform component shortcut M is probably the most valuable tool to use, but we do have the option of the auto explode and the manual explode. I'm just going to drag this into my scratch bar right now to make sure that doesn't record any of this. And I can also minimize my animation timeline, selecting that minus sign so we can capture some more screen space. So if I was to go select auto explode one level, it's going to pop up with a dialog box and no components selected. So we can just select our top level there, assembly, and select auto explode, and you will see that create an explosion level of one of our assemblies. But as you can see, it doesn't necessarily create an ideal explosion that we may want to see, so we would require lots of modifications. We can also change our explosion scale here by changing the distances that all these components explode to. So we can modify that. We could just scroll through there to see what it's actually kind of looks like. Going to cancel that. And if we went up to select our assembly again and transform and all levels, it's going to be the same because we do not have any sub components within or sub assemblies in our assembly. So something very similar, if we had sub assemblies, then you would see those transformed as well. Going to cancel that, and our transform using the manual, we are going to, you can select components and you can select axes to transform these in. They do not provide any rotational transformation. So these are all just linear in your X, Y, Z axis directions. So I'm going to cancel that and going to maximize my timeline again. You'll see nothing has been added to the timeline because I did undo everything. And I'm also working in the scratch panel right now. In our show hide, if we selected, if we wanted to show hide our components, we could select any of those components and select show hide, and we can actually bring those back into our animation at a later time. So you'll see that bushing has been hidden there, and gonna Control Z to undo that and go back. So let's look where we are. Our bushing is back in there. Go to our home, get a nice isometric view there, and now we can start to do some transformations using the M or the transform components icon up there. I'm going to first click on my timeline magnification down in the bottom right hand corner, one click up so that I see this is a scale that I like to work with, and these numbers, this scale is your time in seconds. And we can always adjust the length of time of any individual animation, as you will see as we create these individual transformations. So let's begin by creating our first transformation. I'm going to select my transform component up there in the menu, and I'm going to select my support, both my supports, and I'm going to drag those up. I think about 50 millimeters will do. And what I want to do is I want to keep those transforms split. So I don't want these moving together. I want them moving individually. I want to be able to control that. So I'm just going to select Split Transform. And when I select OK, you will see it has added that to the timeline. So I have my caster support listed, are both of those 1 and 2. And that is my time in my animation there. Going to select both of those by selecting the Control key, and I'm just going to move these out a little bit further so I have some working space back here in case I need it. So I'm going to drag those out. Control selects, holding the Control key selects both, or select the top, and Shift on the bottom would select all of them together. So if I did play that animation, you will see that those will both move at the same time. If I dragged one of these, just select one of these, and if I play that animation, you will see as the time goes on, they will move at different rates. So that's why we did the Split Transform. And we can also make time modifications to this. So we could drag this out, and we could go change that, say, to 8 seconds and make this one match up with that. So that one's going to be a little bit longer. Just previewing our animation so far, and it is reversed, but we will fix that up. So you will see that we can control the length of the period of that animation. And I'm just going to Control Z that to bring those back to their original times, and they are lined up now the exact same time frame. I'm going to fast forward or hit the end of my timeline, and I'm going to add an additional transformation on here in the y-axis going this way. Now we have to be careful here. If we select our transform, select our object, and I'm going to drag that to 100 millimeters. And if I just select OK, you will see that there was not an additional transformation added. It was because we were right on the end of this caster support. So what it did was just add that transformation to this caster support here. So when I hit play, you will see that this one moves out the direction in the y-axis that we just added, but this one doesn't. So I'll just rewind this, and I'm going to select play, and you will see the difference in that. So what we want to do in that case is we have two options on that. So I'm just going to undo that and bring that back, and when I go to the end there, if I do that translation, select that translation, and move my object -100, and if I split the transformation there, it will add that different translation on there. So you can see that has added that on there. The other option that we can do is we can just drag this cursor off our timeline and select transform the exact same distance, -100 millimeters, and select OK. We don't need to select split transform. It is already split from that object. So if we select OK, you will see it has added that. So something to be aware of that could happen if you're wondering why you've added a transformation and it did not show up in your timeline. So we're going to continue and do that with this the other side. Select transform and go back the same distance, which would be 100. And in this case, because I didn't move, actually it is away from there, so I can just select OK, and it should add that on there at the end. So you can see that has been added in our timeline, and we can review that, go back up, select play, and we can see the transformations that happen. And we can control those again in our timeline by moving those earlier or later in our timeline. So an important note to make here, very important, is that before I've created this assembly, I've already kind of gone through this in my head of how I really want this to come together. So I really don't want the animations, I don't want parts moving through parts. So it looks like they're colliding with parts and just moving through them. I want the axle to actually be going through the hole, like you would actually be pushing it through the hole in real life. So I do not want it just coming straight down. So looking, say I wanted to transform my axle in my assembly, I don't really want it coming straight through and through an interference. So I don't want to do that. So I have set up in my mind how I would like this to be assembled. So if I do drag this out just to look to see where I am, what I really would like to do is I would like to bring this wheel in from this direction over here, and the axle and the bushings coming in the other ways from the sides in the y-axis, and the screws will be coming obviously from the top and in two linear directions. So I do have an idea how I'm going to assemble this, or how it's going to animate to make it look as realistic as possible. So something that you should keep in mind when you're doing these assemblies. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this wheel up in this direction. So I'm going to select my transform, and you will see that it is on an angle this way. So if I transform it linearly, it's going to come up on an angle like that, which isn't bad. I would probably prefer not to do it that way. So in that case, I could do a couple things. I could do two transformations. I could rotate this so it is vertical, and then I could do I'm gonna have to rotate that back a bit, and then do my linear transition. So I could attempt it that way. I'm just going to cancel that for now. And with my caster wheel still selected, I'm going to go up to transform and select manual explode. And you'll notice if I select these arrows, I cannot do any dragging on them. So I do want it to go in this direction. And then I'm going to drag that explosion scale this way, and I'm going to select OK, and then I can do another manual explode with that selected, and I'm going to drag it up just slightly, a little too much, to maybe enhance the animation a little bit. So I'm not sure if that went up. I'll just go up a little bit, and that looks fine to me. And you can see our caster wheel transformations have been added to the timeline, and I can just drag those back a little closer to that time. And if I go rewind my timeline, I can play that to see what that is kind of going to look like. We will be reversing this eventually. So I do have my transformations completed with those components so far, and we're going to move on to the next components. So the next transforms I'm going to do is going to be my bushings, and I both want those to move up the same height vertically. So I'm going to do those both at once. I'm going to select both of those components, select my transform, and I'm going to drag those up vertically. And I think 70 millimeters will be good. I do want those split so I can control those individually, and I'm going to select OK, and those have been added. So you see my bushings have both been added in the timeline there. Everything is good. At this point right now, what I probably should do is I should probably save this. Done quite a bit of work, so I want to hit save, and then we can continue on with our additional transformations. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the video, we did not want these bushings coming straight through into the side. So we probably want to transform those away from that. So when they do come down and do slide in, there is no interference. It doesn't look like they are going through there now. If we played that animation now, depending on the order, it would look like that's happened. So I'm just going to select play anyways to see where we're at and see if your animation is looking the same. So you can see when those slid up, they were actually going through the bushing going through the sides, and we really don't want that happening. So we're just going to make some adjustments to those. And this is 10 or 12 millimeters thick, I believe. So what we're going to do is just shift these 12 millimeters in the y-axis just to make sure they do not cross over into any of that material. So selecting our transform component, select that component, and we're going to back this up. We'll go -12. That should eliminate any possible interference. And we should select split transform as well to make sure it doesn't join up with the other one. And we're going to do this one as well. And we will go 12 millimeters to the inside that way as well. And split transform. So now we can verify those were both added on there. So we shouldn't really have any interference with that anymore. The next component we want to do is the axle. So we're going to continue adding our transformations to the axle so that it does slide into this first side support plate. So my idea is that the support plate comes on first, and then the bushing, maybe the wheel, and then the axle, and then the bushing or this other side plate comes in at the end, and then all the 4 screws go in to join it together. Something like that. That's what I am envisioning. Selecting our transform tool, and we're going to drag this out, and I think we could probably drag that out to, let's go 100 millimeters as well that way, and select OK. We don't need to split it because it is a new transformation. It is the only one on the axle. So it does look like it is colliding with that now. So we may have to make some adjustments. We can actually go back to these side supports, and we can change that value. Okay, so we may want those to go up a little higher. Looks like we have some room with the wheel there. So let's see if we can actually modify those so that we don't see this interference here. And dragging our timeline back here, we can see the caster. So when we go through that first time block here, we can see that is the vertical transformation that we did. And that is the linear. So now we know we need to modify this one and that one. So if we are out here, we can change this. We can right click or select that, right click, edit action, and we see it was up 50. So let's try 70 and see if that provides us enough clearance. And then we will go to this one, and we're going to make that same modification, edit action, and we're going to change that one to 70 as well. And that looks a little bit better. There doesn't look like there's any interference. We can rotate under there. There is some clearance in there. We could also move this, change this as well too. So we might want to back this up a bit. We can drag our timeline out here so we can see that a little better. There is our caster, our axle. So we can edit that action, and we can change, maybe we'll drop that to 85 and see how that looks. So that looks better. It looks like we don't have any interference going on. And the last thing we really have left to do is to do the screws. And the screws are probably best to save to last, just because they're probably one of the last parts of the assembly as well too. But we will have to, once we reverse this order, we're going to have to move those to the end accordingly. All our screws will be going up the same height, so I'm going to select those all. Just make sure we remember to select the split transform components, and I'm going to drag those up. We have to go at least 10 millimeters up because that was the thickness of the bottom plate here. So we want this to be at least higher than the 20 or than the 10. So maybe we'll just go up. Let's go up 40 millimeters. Because we are going to be adding some other rotations to this, so it looks like the screw is actually spinning as it's going in. I'm going to select split transforms to make sure we get 4 different transforms. And you can see in our timeline down here, our screws, we have created 4 different transforms. Linearly, in the other direction, the y-axis, we're going to have to add those as well too. So we can select the transform and select both of these, and we're going to drag those. Let's say we can drag those out far away for now. 180, split transform, and again we can make adjustments as well as these, and we'll do 180 in the same or this opposite direction. And just going to type that in here as opposed to dragging it. So we do have both transformations in our screws now, and just going to play that so we can see how our animation is looking so far. Remember, this is going in reverse, which we are going to change all at once. So if you can imagine that going in reverse, that is what your animation is going to look like. Before we do the reverse, this is a good time to actually save your work again. So sometimes doing the reverse order can get a little confusing and you lose track of some of your transformations or what you were supposed to be doing. So it's easier if you save your work here and you can go back and make those modifications here. So now that we have all our transformations done, we're going to go to our caster wheel assembly in our storyboard down in the bottom of the timeline, and we're going to select reverse. So you will notice that everything has been reversed. So when I do hit play, you will see that everything is coming together, not necessarily in the order we wanted to. So in hindsight, we could go back and keep in mind while we're doing that assembly, doing those transformations, to do them in the reverse order when we start. But remember, we can actually make modifications to these. So we're just going to drag those in the timeline. So I'm going to expand this out, and we know our screws are the very last things to go in. So I'm just going to select that first one and then the shift, and I'm just going to drag the screws all the way out to there. So you can see that when I play that animation back again, you can see the result of moving those screws. So the screws are the last component that we want to place in there. So it's not that bad. Going to expand our timeline again, and sometimes you may want to actually select the first one and the shift key to select them all and drag them all to give you some room at the beginning here for creating your animations and building on them chronically in order. So the first thing that we probably want to do, or I think we should do, is probably assemble this first side support plate. So that's the caster support. So just going to make sure I've got not them all selected again, and I'm going to select those two, and I'm going to drag those back. I'm just going to drag those back to the somewhere around the 1 second mark there. And now if I just go back, rewind, and look at my animation, that looks pretty good. So we could actually do the screws at this point too. So we could actually now say, okay, well, we've got this assembled. Do I want to put the screws in, or do I want to save the screws till the end? Well, I think because we can change our views as well on here, camera angle, I think we're going to put those first two screws in right after this side support. So that is that screw and that screw. So we know they're the bottom two. So we're going to move those back so that they are in line with the end here, the end of that transformation. They don't have to be perfect. You can actually overlap them, so you could have them moving at the same time. So just rewinding this, hitting play. And you may want to even do each screw individually. We can do that as well too. I don't think we need to in this case. So what I had planned with my assembly was to now put this bushing, drop that into place, and this wheel we're going to put in after that. So the bushing, going to select that, and you can see that is highlighted in my timeline, so I know it is this part. And when I drag that back, I may have an issue here now that I remember that it might be doing the wrong animation. So we're going to see what happens here with this interference. So rewinding this or just dragging it through, screws are in, and when we see our transformation, we see it actually goes through. So we probably wanted the vertical translation first. So this is where we kind of have to think backwards when we're doing our animations, and why we kind of want to plan your animations out beforehand. This isn't a problem. We can go back and we can make adjustments to this. So unfortunately, within Fusion, we can drag these this way, but we can't drag it before this, before the previous action. But what we can do is we can actually edit this action using the edit start and end. So if I do put a value in here of 2, that will take it back to this 2 seconds. It will go red because now it's kind of saying it's overlapping this. So what we're going to do is we'll just put that back to 2, 0, and we're going to change this to 3, 0, and everything is black now, so we know it's okay. So we're just going to select the check mark, and that does move it back here. So what we're going to do is drag that up to that one, and we want to drag both of these just right up to there, and we're going to have to do the same one with this bushing here as well too, because we did where's that bushing? There's the other bushing. We're going to have to do that one as well. So we're going to do the edit start end and change that to 2.00, so that will put it starting at the 2 second, and we'll end that at the 3 second, and keep those uniform time lengths. Select the check mark, and that brings it in line. So what we're going to do is just drag that up to that bushing there. So now if we go back and play this, we will see that that bushing does not overlap. It's going to do the vertical first, and then the linear in the Y direction. So that looks more realistic. So the next thing we want to do after that animation is we probably want to bring that wheel back into place before we put the other bushing in there. So what we're going to do is the caster wheel is here, and we're just going to drag both of those back to here, and might want to drag these out a bit just to keep them out of the timeline. And we can just play this from here just to make sure that's what we wanted. So screws, bushing, and then the wheel. So everything's looking fine right now. What we probably want to do now is we probably want to change this our viewpoint looking from the other side. Just going to back this up a bit, and we probably want to look at the other side. We are going to have to bring that bushing down because it is going to interfere with that wheel. So maybe we want to actually put the other bushing in before the wheel. That's not a problem. We have our wheel transformations here. We can drag those out, and what we're going to do is put the other support in there and then follow that up with the bushing. So let's select the other side. We can select that in the drawing space there, the model space, so we can see which caster it is, and we're going to drag that, both of these, back to this point here. So if we hit play, and we might get some interference on that, which may not work out too well. So we'll play that and see what's happening. And that doesn't look too bad. And now we can actually drop our bushing in there, our other bushing. So selecting on there so we know where it is in our timeline, and we'll drag that back to there and clear this axle out of the way and just play that to see if everything is the way we want it to be. So everything looks good. We could probably bring that wheel in now. And our wheel is right here, so we can drag that in line, close to there, and this is our axle, so we probably want to bring that out. And we're going to change our viewpoint for the axle. Just going to rewind this a bit to see if our wheel is coming into play like we wanted it to. That looks perfect, and the axle is coming in from that side. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to change our viewpoint to the other side. So we're going to unpause our view here, and then we're going to look at this side, and it is zoomed in a bit, so we can select that zoom, and you'll see it has added our camera, our view right here. And this is our axle. So we probably want to drag this before our axle starts to come in. So if we go back and play that, you will see how this view comes into play. I'm going to select play, and we'll watch that viewpoint change. And we can actually change that view to make it a little bit slower. We'll increase the time on that. And we could probably start the axle a bit before, so it does overlap a bit. Rewind that a bit and see how that looks. So that looks good. We see our other screws, and they are going all the way in. So looks like it's complete. The only thing we probably want to do is add our rotations to our screws. To make it look like they are actually spinning. Before I add the rotation to the screws, I think I'm just going to drag this camera back a bit, because we can actually start changing that view a little bit early. It doesn't have to be, we'll still be able to see the wheel moving in that view, so might add a little cooler effect to that, having that start a little bit early. You can control that and make those adjustments to however you think is appropriate. So what we're going to do now is we're going to adjust the rotation on those screws so it does look like those screws are spinning, make it look a little more realistic. It's going to go up and do a save again, since we've got quite a bit of work done here. And I'm going to drop my storyboard down here a bit so I can see my screws. And I'm going to select transform again. And I'm going to select this screw here, and they will be rotating clockwise because that's the way screws go in. So I'm going to, as I'm rotating this, you can see the degrees going up. So if I spin it around once, it goes to 360, okay, and then it starts all over again. So what we have to do is we actually have to put a larger value in there to see it spin more than once. So our angle is going to be 360 times 2 would be 720, times 2 would be 1440, times 2 again would be 2880. So that should be enough rotation, and we're going to add that to each of those screws. So we're going to go down to our screws here. There's our screw rotation, and we're going to do that with each screw. So select your transform, and we want to select this component and make sure we're going in the right direction. 2880. Okay. So we do have our screw rotations all done. So they are going to rotate clockwise, but you will notice that they are way out here compared to the other transformations. So what we want to do is we really want those screws turning as they are going downwards. So let's look at our first set of screws here. Actually, these ones were the first ones. So when I look at this screw here, I have to zoom out a bit so we can see that. When we're dragging that, that is moving in the y-axis, and then it moves down. So we really want those rotations probably going the exact same time. Make sure I don't select all of those. Just select the rotation, and I'm going to drag that rotation back so it is in line. And I'll line that up with the same amount of time, and I'll drag that one there as well. And we're going to have to do that with the other screws here. So this rotation we want going with the vertical, and the same with this one as well. I want to drag that so they are in the same length of time. So if we do play that animation, I'm just going to go to a full screen so we can see that, and hit play. I did not rewind that. Oh, something's funny going on there. So we're going to have to fix that. Hit escape to go back to or out of the full screen mode, and I'm trying to find out what's going on there. So why those are rotating, they're rotating about a different axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete those rotations if that happened to you, and make sure that they are on their own. I could have been overlapping something. Maybe that's why. So I'm just going to back and redo those transformations on that screw. 2880. And transform this one. 2880. And I should drag that out a bit just in case. And I'll back that up in line. And hopefully that has fixed that problem. That looks better. So if you notice that the views, the zooming had changed from what we initially started with, that is because we did not pause this, or I did not pause that while we were working on this. So while I was doing edits, I was zooming in and out, and I forgot to pause this, or I forgot to work in my scratch pad here. So you will see it has added all these additional views, camera views. So what we're going to do is we're going to select each one of those, and we're going to delete those. We're going to keep that one view in there that we wanted, that we added in there for the rotation. We're going to rewind this, and we're going to zoom into a level that looks good. Hide my timeline so I can see everything, and that looks like it's going to fit well, and that should now create a nice view capturing everything in the viewport. So let's go back to full screen. Everything is visible. Selecting play. I did notice a few tweaks that could be made. If you notice the side, the axle support, it was actually, the axle was colliding with the side bracket there. So when the side bracket came down, so we probably want to shift that axle a bit, and the screws looked like they're rotating a little too much. Those are quick tweaks we can do, but once you have reversed everything, that is something becomes a little bit more challenging than trying to make that edit. So I'm going to explain that. So I'm just going to click in my screen here to go back to my edit screen. So when we are in the reverse mode, looking at this, when we switched everything to reverse, what it did is it put that axle in starting out there. So if we go to edit that, it's going to change its editing, or its movement from that start position. So if I select edit action here, and I go to make those adjustments, it's going to add a different animation in there than you would think. So if we're just going to drag that out to there, we have to remember that everything was going in reverse. So if I select, say I wanted to bring that out further to avoid that collision, if I bring that out and I go play that, remember when we did it in reverse, it started there in reverse. So now it's actually going to move it in that direction. So I'm going to undo that. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually go back to our assembly here and down on the bottom, and we're going to reverse that, go back to our axle, which was here. So we could move our timeline along there, and we can make that adjustment here, edit action, and we're going to pull that out further here. And that looks like it probably should be enough, and that looks fine. And I'm going to right click and put this back to reverse. So when we do see that animation now of when that support comes down, you do not see that coming down on top of that. So we might have added a little too much. And the rotations as well too, we probably want to make those rotations, edit some of those. We can bring those back down to a little bit less. So we're going to save again and view our final view here. So we do want to actually turn our view on, and we are starting off here and viewing our full screen. There is a 1 second pause, so we could actually select all our items here, select the top one and the bottom one, and we could drag that right to the begin, drag them all to the beginning, so it does start at the beginning. We can make any adjustments in any of these, in any of this timeline here. Maybe these ones here, I see there's a little bit of a gap between the end of this and the start of that, so might want to drag those in a little bit, and we can overlap them, remember, so they don't always have to go in sequence. We can have more than one motion going at once. So going to play that full screen, select play, and I think everything looks good now. So you'll notice those screws will be spinning a little bit too fast. But you can tweak that if you like. Hit escape back to our editing screen, select save, and we now have a completed edit in there.